Good morning, everyone. The Board of Estimates is now called to order. For those who are with us live, at this time, please ensure your mobile devices, electronic devices are on silent or at least turned off. For those online, because we have this set up in hybrid fashion, please wait for the board to recognize you, then unmute yourself and say your name and begin to speak. At this time, I would like to ask our amazing clerk, Ms. Celeste Amato, for any additions, corrections, or noted abstentions to today's agenda.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, everyone. We do have some changes, corrections, and a few walk-ons this morning, which I will list and then read into the agenda, as is our normal practice. First up, we have on page 108, item number 11, TR 22006. Please delete reconstruction of footways citywide and insert concrete slab repair citywide. On page 180, item number 1, SC 983R, please change the date for bids to be received and opened from January 4th, 2023 to January 11th, 2023. On page 180, item number 2, WC 1257, please change the date for bids to be received and opened from February 2nd, 2023 to February 1st, 2023. On page 181, we have a walk-on item from the Department of Transportation. It is a ratification and amendment number 1 to Memorandum of Understanding. And we will have an additional walk-on for DOT, page 182, a transfer of funds for change order number 2 on project TR 03319, Bridge Construction Management Service, for replacement of bridge number 3112 Harford Road over Herring Run. And on page 183, Department of Transportation, extra work order number 2 with Rummel, Klepper, and Cull, LLP. I will read those memos shortly, and I do want to apologize to Department of Transportation. These were an oversight in my office, and they didn't make it onto the agenda, even though they were received on time. So sorry about that, Transportation, and thank you to the board for their indulgence in letting us walk these items on this morning so we don't hold up that important work. Those items I will follow up with reading for page 184 through 185, which is a walk-on from Department of Public Works. It's an amendment number 3 to an agreement with Pure Technologies, and that item is to support the Montebello emergency work that's being done that many of you have heard about. And on page 186, there is a companion transfer of funds for that same work. And now I will read through those items. Bear with me, and I'll read them as quickly as I can. Department of Transportation, ratification amendment number 1 to Memorandum of Understanding. The action requested of the board is to ratify the Memorandum of Understanding with the Maryland Department of Transportation State Highway Administration for Baltimore Greenway Trails Network Middle Branch segment, and to approve and authorize execution of amendment number 1. This ratification is retroactive to December 11th, 2021, and the period of the amendment is effective upon board approval through December 31st, 2023. The amount and source of funds is not applicable. In this case, it is not additional funding. The second walk-on item this morning, again, Department of Transportation, transfer of funds. The board is requested to approve a transfer of funds for change order number 2 on project PRJ 000497. This is NHPP BD 38947 state contract number 3212, BC 45001, Bridge Construction Management Services for replacement of bridge number 3212 Harford Road over Herring Run with Rummel, Klepper, and Cull, LLP in the amount of $200,000. Third item is Department of Transportation, extra work order number 2. The board is requested to approve extra work order number 2 with Rummel, Klepper, and Cull, LLP to provide bridge construction management services for contract TR 03319, replacement of bridge number 3212 Harford Road Bridge over Herring Run state contract number 3212 BC 2450001. The amount of money and source of funds is $200,000 in capital funds. And again, apologies to Department of Transportation for missing those items this week in the agenda. Next up, we have from Department of Public Works, amendment number 3 to an agreement. The board is requested to approve and authorize execution of Amendment Number 3 to agreement with Pure Technologies under project number 1201, large diameter transmission main condition assessment, analysis, and long-term monitoring. The amendment increases the period of the contract by 1 year for a total contract period of 9 years. The current expiration date is February 23, 2024, and the new expiration date is February 23, 2025. This amendment is within the original scope of work and was requested by the agency. The amount of money is $13,136,785.71. And the final item this morning is a transfer of funds to a company. That last action, the board is requested to approve a transfer of funds in the amount of $14 million to support the large diameter main renewal. Those are all of our changes and corrections for this morning. We have no protests received. We have the following item deferrals on page 172, 173, and 174. We have police department back pay items. Those items have been deferred at the request of the comptroller. We have the following items that have been moved to the non-routine agenda. On page 1, item number 1, Department of Audits, Biennial Performance Audit of BSIT. Page number 1, item number 2, Department of Audits, applying agreed-upon procedures for Port Covington local hiring. On page 157, Department of Law, Settlement Agreement and Release. On page 58, Department of Law, Settlement Agreement and Release. On page 59 through 60, Department of Finance, Payment in lieu of taxes. On page 65, Board of Finance, Baltimore City Public School System Capital Improvement Program for FY 2024 through 29. Page 85 through 87, Baltimore City Health Department Work Plan Summary. Page 99 through 100, Mayor's Office of Infrastructure Development Resolution. Page 102 through 103, item number 2, Bureau of Procurement, B50006293, Banking Services is being moved to the routine agenda. Page 168, Bureau of Risk Management, Department of Finance, renewal of various FY23 flood insurance policies. Page 169 through 170, Bureau of Risk Management, Department of Finance, renewal of various FY23 flood insurance policies. And page 179, Department of Law consultant agreement. We also have the following items moving to the routine agenda. Again, that was page 102 through 103. Item number 2, Bureau of Procurement, B50006393, Banking Services. And we are also offering to the board, or suggesting to the board rather, to move pages 181 through 183, the Department of Transportation items that the clerk needed to walk on this morning. Due to clerk's administrative oversight, if we could also move those back to the routine agenda. And that's all I had this morning, Mr. President. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. That is not all I had this morning. I also need to note the abstentions for the members of the board this morning. Apologies. The Honorable Mayor Brandon Scott is abstaining on page 76, Health Department, agreement with JHU, page 77, Health Department, agreement with JHU, and page 78, Health Department, agreement with JHU. The Honorable President Nick Mosby is abstaining on pages 22 through 23, Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs, grant agreement with Job Opportunities Task Force, Inc., and Be the Revolution, doing business as B360. The Honorable President is voting nay on that item this morning. On pages 24 through 25, Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs, grant agreement with the Maryland Philanthropy Network, Inc. and Black Yield Institute. The Honorable President is voting nay on that item this morning, and we are noting it in this section. On page 131 through 132, items number 17, Bureau of Procurement, contract number 08000, system software support for judicial dialogue versus paper software solutions. And finally, on page 132 through 134, item number 18, Bureau of Procurement, contract number 08000, system support for judicial dialogue case management system and dialogue integration systems. The Honorable Bill Henry is abstaining on pages 175, Department of Recreation and Parks, travel request, and on page 176, Mayor's Office of Neighborhood and Safety, travel requests. City Solicitor Jim Shea has no abstentions this morning, and Deputy Director of Public Works, Director Mitchell's designee this morning, Richard Luna, also has no abstentions this morning. That now concludes my remarks. Thank you, Mr. President.
At this time, I'll ask for a motion to approve the opening statement.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The opening statement is adopted. I now direct the board's attention to a memorandum from my office dated November the 14th, 2022, identifying matters to be considered as routine agenda items, together with any corrections, additions, or noted abstentions and no votes that have been noted by our clerk. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the items contained in the routine agenda.
Move approval. Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The routine agenda items have been adopted. Our first item on the non-routine agenda can be found on page 1, Department of Audits reports. This first report is biannual performance of Baltimore City Information Technology, BCIT, for fiscal years ending June 30th, 2020 and June 30th, 2019. The board is requested to note receipt of this audit report. At this time, we will hear from our auditor. Mr. Auditor, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, Comptroller, honorable board members. I am the City Auditor. My name is Josh Pash. I am here to present the biennial performance audit for BCIT. I would like to thank the BCIT staff and the audit team for their work on this project. Next slide, please. So in this presentation, I will go over the audit objectives and the scope, identified risks, our findings, and the status of prior findings. Our scope was to evaluate whether the city has adequate policies and procedures to guide the city's IT procurement process, to increase efficiency and effectiveness IT operations and costs. We also followed up on the prior findings, and we were looking at fiscal years 2019. Our scope was specifically for software procurement, and the BCIT divisions that were included were infrastructure, information security, and applications. We identified the following risks during our audit: agencies bypassing the IT procurement review process, agencies procuring duplicate applications, which increase unnecessary costs that can be spread over other software, lack of consistency, compliance, and continuity in the IT procurement review process. We noted that there are 3 procurement methods. The first 2, city buy and EA. The process used to procure these, or IT software, is the agency submits to the infrastructure division, and then as the infrastructure division sees fit, they forward to the InfoSec, which is security, and the apps section, and then all 3 of them will either approve or deny the software requests. The other procurement method is P-cards, and that methodology is the agency will submit a form requesting to buy the software. That will go to an admin staff in BCIT, and then the admin staff will notify the related sections, infrastructure, InfoSec, and applications, who will let the admin staff know that it's been approved or denied, and then they will submit that form to the agency. That will be used to procure the P-card, submit that form to the UFBOP, and then the Bureau of Procurement will approve that based on that. Our first finding is agencies can bypass the BCIT's IT software procurement process using certain procurement methods, which we identified. So there are 3 methods, as we noted: city buy, EAs, and procurement cards. For city buy, there is automated controls that capture IT software procurements and notify BCIT. For EAs and P cards, there are not controls established for EAs, and the P cards, the controls are limited. And so basically the way that BCIT is made aware of those is when the agency informs them. So we noted the risks is that an agency can procure software without BCIT approval process, which increases IT security risk and also increases the risk of obtaining duplicated software. The example I'd like to give is purchasing, let's say, Adobe or Foxit while we have Nitro Pro, and this basically increases the cost to the city and also lack of efficiency. So our recommendation is that BCIT go through the Workday system and see that that has adequate controls to address the risks that were identified, and then to have communication with the Director of Finance to review the current controls as they exist now to see if they control the related risks regarding P-card that we have identified here. The second finding is application functional area does not have process and system to identify and maintain a centralized inventory of business critical applications. So during our audit, we requested a list of city applications. The app section was unable to provide that complete list, and the risk is that there may be software that is not identified, and therefore when there are further reviews, that is not captured to see if it is compatible and consistent with what the city already has. Looking at the cause, there were not policies and procedures outlining the roles and responsibilities of apps to record and maintain that list of city applications. The other risks we identified related to this is that the city or BSIT may not be able to effectively perform management upgrades of patches because they're unaware of the software, operational and financial planning because they might not know everything that's out there, remediation of security issues. So when an application puts out a patch that's a security issue, if BSIT's not aware that we have that software, they can't ensure that it's been placed. And then continuity and testing recovery to make sure that all of the applications have appropriate recovery and backup protocols. And then the second item there is that we may not be aware of applications so that those can be patched, updated, and secured properly. Continuing on, our recommendation is for BSIT to develop a complete list of business critical applications and then to formalize that process. The third finding is that there's not an audit trail for BSIT infrastructure decisions for IT procurement review. So we found that when a request comes in to the infrastructure personnel, and this is related with CityBuy, those personnel will use their institutional knowledge to identify whether that needs to go to the security section and the app section for the review. Alternatively, if it's an application that they're aware that city's already using, they identify that does not have to go through those review, but there's no documentation of what goes to those two divisions or which doesn't. And then we also noted there's not documentation in CityBuy whether those requests were actually went to InfoSec and the applications for review. And then we noted the risk is that that process is not formalized of which applications have to be reviewed by InfoSec and application in the application section. And then we identified risks basically when we were trying to identify what went through the review process, who reviewed it. We basically needed someone from infrastructure to walk us through each procurement to identify which ones did go through the in-depth review process and which ones didn't and why. So our recommendation is that BSIT have infrastructure document their decisions and note whether they're recruiting them, whether they're routing them through InfoSec and the apps, and then to formalize that process. Finding 4, as we looked at the AM manual over computer systems and services, and we noted that it's outdated, ambiguous, and inconsistent with current practices. The policy was last updated in 2012. When referring to ambiguous, it could be interpreted that the IT review only has only to be done for procurements of $5,000 and above. Therefore, if you're following the AM policy, some agencies may not think they actually have to go through BSIT's approval if it is for $5,000 or less. The inconsistent policy with current practices is that BSIT's practice is to review all software procurements that to identify the risks and to either approve or deny. Finding 4, recommendations. The recommendations is that BSIT work with the Director of Finance. The Director of Finance is in charge of maintaining the AM and to update the related AM policies and then to communicate those with the city employees so that everyone knows what the current policy and requirements are, to do enforcement there, and then also to revise them and update them periodically as the IT environment is moving quickly, and then that they can consider industry standards, which will be keeping pace with the current environment and provide a guide there. We reviewed the implementation of prior findings. All of them were fully implemented. There was a finding regarding the call center, average time to answer 311 calls, and then the percentage of 311 calls, and then the number of calls received. And all of those were fully implemented by BSIT. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Arter. Just one quick question. It appeared from the presentation that all the software that we were kind of talking about is off-the-shelf type of software. Through your analysis, was anything done with software that's specifically developed for city operations or agencies?
Software that is developed through city operations uses a different path. So that is typically hiring a company or a professional to develop that software, and that is managed and monitored as they're going through the software process. So it's not procuring an application which has to be evaluated as, if it fits within the industry, because as they're building it, that's part of the specs of making sure it integrates with the city.
The concern I have is, I think it was point number 3 or 4, where we were talking about BSIT's evaluation from a security perspective of software. I know that we've seen it, and it's been strongly dialogued on this board when agencies utilize professional services to kind of select who they're going to use to build out software for the city. I guess I'll talk to BSIT about being in that process, but that would be outside of the scope of this audit, right?
Correct. This is to evaluate software that's coming in. That would be more similar to the EA process, where BSIT would be able to identify those only when the agency informed them.
Got it. That's we're always on the same page. That was the concern that I have with that. I appreciate that. At this point, are there any questions or concerns from members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, thank you so much. They are. Mr. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. And before I ask my questions, I'm sorry. I guess that's right. This is really for Todd, not for Josh.
Okay. Yeah.
So, okay. But I did want to take the opportunity while they're both up here to recognize Director Carter and his team at BSIT for their cooperation with the Department of Audits. They are making a very forthright commitment to address the findings. BSIT has a clear plan for implementing the needed changes, and their communication with audits throughout the process was proactive and timely, and we appreciate that, and I wanted to make that recognition public.
Thank you, Mr. Auditor. Mr. Chief, Northeast Baltimore's finest, welcome to the board. We don't get a chance to talk to you often.
I'm sure you miss me.
Yeah. At this time, the floor is yours.
We agree with the findings that are outlined in the report. As Comptroller Henry mentioned, we also put together detailed plans to correct those findings. As an example, we just made a change to the acceptable use policy, and we routed that through the process and is still going through the process, so we have knowledge of how the process to change these policies work, and are willing and able to actually take on that task. Relative to the inventory, we do have an inventory for all the software that we support directly. There's software that are outside of what we support. We'll certainly make sure that we get that. At the end of the day, the risks are somewhat mitigated because everyone just can't put anything on their machine. You just can't go load something on a machine or on a server to use either at a department level or an enterprise level. So there are additional controls that help mitigate the risk outlined in the audit.
Just kind of following up on the line of questioning I had with the auditor.
Sure.
For non-off-the-shelf type software that is procured through like the professional services agreement and agencies like working with a vendor to help develop Baltimore City specific software, I'll just call it. What role is BSIT in that? Like, or how would you know to ensure that during the development that our standards and our security regulations are kept up with the vendor that we secured?
So a couple scenarios exist. The first scenario, we buy a packaged software, and that packaged software needs to integrate with the software that we have within Baltimore City. In that case, we will have gone through the process that's outlined and review that software to determine that it meets the security requirements, and if it doesn't, here's how we mitigate those requirements. The integrations that we do to other software, that's something that's code that we're building. That code is kept in a repository where it's version controlled and managed through that method. So that's kind of one scenario. A scenario if someone goes out and hires somebody to build software. That software, in most cases, most of our shops don't have the capacity to do that, and when they do, they work in conjunction with BSIT to make sure that they follow the existing standards, languages, databases, communication protocols that we have, and then that's how we manage that. It's no formal process for those software that is built externally outside of BSIT.
Understood. And so basically, at this point, you don't see any concern there with agencies?
We don't have a lot of developers and agencies building software. Our challenges tend to be we are buying more and more SaaS or software as a solution types of packages, the integration, and what happens to our data if our data is housed in the cloud. And we do have controls for that.
Thank you. Mr. Comptroller?
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning.
Morning.
In your management response to finding number 4, which specifically identified 2 policies in the administrative manual that are outdated, ambiguous, and inconsistent with current practice. The audit recommends updating those policies, communicating the updates to city employees, and enforcing compliance. Do you foresee any operational impact on BSIT with those added responsibilities of education and enforcement, and do you already have the resources you need to undertake those efforts?
I think it's too early to tell, be quite honest with you. Until we get into the policies, we do have agency personnel that do IT work, and once we get into the process, I think we'll have a better idea as to what incremental needs are, whether it's for us in BSIT or for the other agencies.
Okay, so one of the things we've been doing is we've been bringing agencies back to do check-ins on their agreements to respond to audit findings. Mm-hmm. How long do you think you would need to assess that before we should ask about checking in?
Can I get back to you on that
Okay.
once I talk to our team?
Okay, all right, well, we will check back on that. In the management response to finding number 1 on page 17, BSIT agreed with the finding and set an implementation date of the 4th quarter of fiscal 2023. Can you give us any additional details on the plan to make sure that Workday has adequate controls in place to reduce the risk of agencies bypassing your IT procurement process?
So the good thing about Workday is that it does have a routing function. So the automation of that function is what we just have to validate. So instead of a transaction is developed for procurement, it would go to our infrastructure director. We have the ability now to make sure it goes to the infrastructure, apps, and security. So it's just a matter of validating that. That's the way it was designed,
Okay.
but we're going to validate it and formalize that for the audit report.
Okay. And let's see. In the also going back to the management response for finding number 4, or finding IV, BSIT estimates that updating the 2 AM policies and communicating with city employees will also be implemented by the 4th quarter of FY24, which would be April, June of 2024, or just under 2 years from now. Is there any possibility that one of the things you'll discover as you get into this is that it could be done faster?
We may. We're basing our estimates here based upon just going through the process to update the AM policy for acceptable use. What we found, for example, is that once we go through and get comments from everyone, then it has to go through another review. So there's some lag time of just not only the reviews that we have to have with everyone else, but then it goes to BRC, and they have to do a review as well. Okay. Sort of a double check. So it really depends upon how weighty those policies are and and the comment cycle, the 2 comment cycles that we have to work through. But we will see. If we can speed that up, we will.
At the risk of using a construction analogy and an information technology question, I'm a big fan of measure twice, cut once. So if you're, double checking it, that's going to be a good thing. Mr. President, Mr. City Administrator, I have no more questions, but I do want to continue to praise Director Carter and his team. I think they deserve a lot of credit for turning around a department that had been in the news for all the wrong reasons just a couple years ago. Yeah, thank you.
Can I get you all to sign this right here? No.
Yeah.
All right, take care. Thank you.
Thank you for your leadership. Are there any other questions or concerns? Want to make sure. So at this point, we're good. We're going to put the report as noted. The next item on our routine can be found on page 1, Department of Audits Report. This is an independent auditor's report on applying agreed upon procedures for Port Covington Local Hiring Memorandum of Understanding from September 14th, 2016 through December 31st, 2020. Once again, I'll turn the floor over to our auditor, Mr. Josh Pass, and his team for any updates.
Good morning, Mr. Prayer, CAO, and the Comptroller, honorable members of the board. My name is Josh Pash. I'm the City Auditor, and I would like to thank our audit team and the client, the developer, for their efforts in completing this project. I am to present today the Independent Auditor's Report on agreed upon procedures for Port Covington Local Hiring Memorandum. That is one piece of the overall memorandum for the period of 2016 through 2020. I will be going over the objectives and scope, the results of applying those agreed upon procedures, the causes and recommendations, and then additional observations that we noted. For the audit scope was to evaluate Sagamore Development Company complied with provisions of Part 1 of the MOU. For the new Port Covington Local Hiring Memorandum, I just want to note that as agreed upon procedures, it's not an audit, so we do not make an assessment and report on controls, and we report on basically compliance with agreed upon steps, and in this case, those steps are the requirements within the MOU for the developer. So going through the agreed upon procedures, so for the first one, we reviewed did the developer impose the local hiring mandates, and we found no exceptions. For the second one, we reviewed did the developer meet the requirement to pay a minimum wage, and we found no exceptions. For the third one, we reviewed that the developer had the contractors and subcontractors put in place formal apprenticeship programs that were required, and that was not applicable. The TIF bonds and the program had not gotten to that level of progress to identify that, and we'll come back to that on causes and recommendations. For item 4, we looked at whether the developer and contractors and subcontractors are providing the workforce plan to MOAD, and we did not find any exceptions in there. For the fifth one, we looked at the new Port Covington Advisory Committee and whether that was established. We did not note exceptions there. However, we do have a comment on that as we get to our causes and recommendations. For number 6, we reviewed compliance that all contractors have a requirement for the local hiring mandate, including an Employee Baltimore executive order, and we found no exceptions there. For number 7, we looked at whether the developer was providing $80,000 payment to MOAD on an annual basis to employ a new Port Covington local coordinator in the office of MOAD. We found no exceptions there. We actually identified that the requirement didn't start until December 30th. However, for 2 previous years, they had been already reimbursed MOAD $160,000 for 2 years, so they did an early adoption there. For number 8, we looked at the requirement to post all new jobs needed by the contractor awardees through MOAD and their one-stop career centers network and workforce partner network, and we found no exceptions there. For item number 9, we looked at the developer in consultation with MOED, that they have been or will be producing promotional marketing materials, holding job fairs, and basically informing community residents of employment opportunities. This was not applicable because of the effective date and where the progress of the project had been at that time. For step 10, we looked at the requirement for contractors and subcontractors to provide MOED and the developer with manpower reports on a monthly basis, and that the developer has been providing local hiring advisory to the local hiring advisory committee and MOED those manpower reports to show their progress and compliance. We found no exceptions there. For number 11, we verified that the developer has established a Port Covington Workforce Opportunity Center. As we were in the middle of COVID, we noted that that wasn't done, but it wasn't applicable because that the requirement didn't come in until December 30th of 2020. For number 12, we looked at has a developer funded 100 youth work jobs and at a specified rate. We found no exceptions there. For step 13, we looked at the developer and their policies and procedures for compliance as to monitoring and tracking the following. One was that city residents have access to employment opportunities made through the construction project and other projects that fall within this, and we found no exceptions there. Under there, we also looked at compliance with the local hiring mandate, and as to on-site workers, we didn't find any exceptions there. And then the local hiring mandate regarding new hires, and we found no exceptions there. And then we also looked at the provision for reasonable and affordable transportation to the Newport Covington project. This we found was also not applicable due to the timing and the requirements. And then we also looked at the funding of $25 million over 15 years for workforce development initiatives. Based on where the project was and the requirement did not come into place until December 30th, that was not applicable. And then for F, we looked at compliance for contractors and subcontractors with the apprenticeship program and compliance with the local hiring MOU. And then this also based on where the project was and the requirement not coming in being effective at this time was not applicable, but I will come back to this in the causes and recommendations. Causes and recommendations. For items 3 and 13, we noted that as of January 2021, developer and MOED had not established a process to collect, record, and report the results to the local hiring committee and to verify compliance with the following local hiring MOU. And then the requirement was that this infrastructure project is required to utilize apprentices enrolled in a formal apprenticeship program, and that not have been established. Again, it wasn't applicable at this time. Part of our view was, since it was becoming applicable as we were wrapping up, to see if they had a plan and controls already established, and those were not established at the time. Recommendation as is the developer and MOED, they collaborate, they establish a process to hire apprentices and to report those results to the advisory committee. For procedure number 5, we noted that for the advisory committee and the requirement to establish one, we noted that it was established in fiscal year 2018, but then it had not been updated when the elections, and basically since the 2021, the change in the mayor's and comptroller's offices, we noted that there are 16 advisory committee members and 3 were no longer with that organization. 2 we couldn't validate, and then 1 had changed jobs, going from the city council president's office to the mayor's office. And then basically a requirement is the advisory committee is comprised of representatives appointed to and approved by the mayor, and one of those representatives will be approved by the comptroller. So our recommendation is that the mayor, the comptroller, and the developer reestablish and make sure that those vacant positions are filled. We had some other observations, and we put those together in a management letter. The first observation was looking at the MOU. There wasn't a clear specification and identification of city-side responsible people to verify the developers and the subcontractors' compliance with key terms. So the requirements spread multiple city agencies, and the agencies either were not aware of their role or were not completing the role. And so we found that none of the city agencies, including MOED, who was aware of the project, were validating the developer's compliance with the local hiring MOU. The second observation is we noted that the Department of Audits was listed in the MOU as a monitor. This can be construed in multiple ways, but the intent that we saw in other people was that the Department of Audits had a management role in monitoring compliance of the developer due to government auditing standards and maintaining independence so that we can do the annual financial report and the single audit. Audits cannot have a management role. So our recommendations in that area were that responsible agencies that are related to the different terms in the MOU, that those be identified, and to amend the MOU to clarify the contract monitoring roles and responsibilities, both so the developer knows who to send the reports to and the validation of compliance, and then also to include the city's right to audit clause in both the MOU with the developer and have them included with subcontractors. That basically gives the city to dig deep and go into depth under the reports that are submitted and to validate them and give a level of assurance there. And then we also recommended that the developer have a right to audit clause with any general contractors, subcontractors, so that the city will have the right to audit going past the developer into all of the vendors and subcontractors. And then basically formalizing that so that each city agency that it's their specialty in the area of the requirement by the MOU, that they have a formalized procedure so that it can be consistent and that the key contract terms that need to be validated are being validated. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Auditor. At this time, are there any questions or concerns for the auditor?
I guess technically, I have one for the developer and one for MBU or the
Mowat?
administration.
MOED, and they're here.
Who's not here?
MOED, they are here.
Yeah, I think.
And there's developer.
Yeah, hold on. So where do you want to go first?
Developer's fine.
You're good?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Auditor.
You want to do MOD first?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Mark, we're going to come to you second. We're going to go to MOED. They would like to present. Director Perkins Cohen, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Board. For the record, my name is Jason Perkins Cohen. I am the Director of the Mayor's Office of Employment Development. I want to thank the auditor and his team for their patience and persistence. I know this was not easy. And we concur with the auditor's findings. Just quick notes, as he mentioned, in terms of the local hiring committee itself, the audit went through 2020, as he mentioned, pandemic, change in administration. The committee is back on track, and we feel good about that. In terms of apprenticeship utilization process, we've been working closely with the developer, and we feel like we have a strong process in place moving forward and are collecting data on that now. And then the last point I would just make is sort of more broad to the auditor's points. First of all, given the agency, Mayor's Office of Employment Development, we are solely focused on helping city residents get jobs. We are always in support of local hiring requirements and having strong ones that helps residents get jobs. And we will do everything we can to support that endeavor. We view ourselves on this MOU as the contract monitors for local hiring, and we are monitoring the contract as specified in the MOU. So we do have staff in place. They work with the developer. We know the names and addresses of everyone who's working on the project, and because we know their address, it's very easy to turn that into a numerator and a denominator to determine percentages. So based on the auditor's observation, if the city and the developer get together and adjust the MOU in any way, you can feel confident that we will follow those adjustments and monitor to those specifications. Thank you very much.
Thank you. At this point, are there any questions for MOED? Hearing and seeing none, thank you, Director. At this time, we will call on the developer, Port Covington, AKA Baltimore Peninsula. Is that right?
That is correct, Council President.
The floor is yours. Mr.
Yes.
Mark Brody, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Mark Brody from the Baltimore Peninsula Project, Government Affairs and Community Impact. I would just echo what Jason Perkins Cohen said. We have a process in place. I have a report here for the apprenticeships. Whiting Turner is our prime contractor for the infrastructure project. And they report on, as the MOU states, it is all eligible positions that have a formal apprenticeship program available. We have a 12% goal so that any eligible positions on the TIF infrastructure project, 12% of those people have to be enrolled in a formal apprenticeship program. And as of this moment, 33% are. And I can submit this report electronically to the body as well. So we feel very good about that. And early adoption was a term that he used. We've been doing these things since before it was required. So I think citizens of Baltimore should be happy about that.
Does that conclude your presentation, Mr. Brody?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. At this time, are there any questions or concerns from members of this board for the developer? Mr. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Not a question or concern, but more of a positive comment. I just thought it was very encouraging to see in the management response that the developer is willing to report its MBWB compliance data to the city's MBU office using the Claros platform, which is going to make it easier for us to track and eventually, if not immediately, to make that information available to the public so that your compliance is open and transparent.
Absolutely.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you for saying that. Appreciate it.
Are there any other questions or concerns? Hearing and seeing none, we appreciate you.
Thank you all.
At this time, we will report this.
I did have one other question, but I didn't see.
Oh,
No,
for
no,
the
not
administration.
yet, for the administration.
Floor is still yours, Ms. Comptroller.
And this was technically for Chief Lundy, but I'm not sure if he's here or if he's online. Oh, he's online. There he is. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning, Mr. Comptroller. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm well. Yourself?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Good. I just wanted to check in and see if you would be willing to come to the board in 6 months, which would be our meeting of May 17th, 2023, and just be able to give the board a high-level overview of how the developer is doing in compliance 6 months down the road.
Of course, sir. That's not a problem at all. I want to commend, first and foremost, Mark Brody, because he's instrumental to Baltimore Peninsula. He's been a tremendous partner to my office in getting participation on this project. All their participation is being reported in the Claros online platform. So I actually get notifications for the MOIT reports, but also whenever they're putting in any MWBE information, it is all there, all their statement of intent. They're doing an excellent job with the project, and I'm sure they're going to be exceeding the goals that are in place.
Does Claros have an outward-facing portal that the public can access?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, all right.
Because it does contain a lot of technical specs and things like that, plans. So I think for security's sake, it is an internal to the city and the developers, just so we can see what they're actually doing.
But we could talk about what would be involved in developing maybe a separate dashboard that would be able to pull certain information from Claros and let the public access the information that wouldn't be restricted or redacted in any reason.
Sure, and I don't want to misspeak. I'd have to refer it back to Mark, but I do believe that on their main website, the Baltimore Peninsula, they have been sharing a lot of their data and statistics that is public-facing, showing their numbers thus far for the project. I think there's kind of a numbers at a glance type thing on their main site that typically does show where they are.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. Are there any other questions or concerns from members of this board? Hearing and seeing none, this report will be noted. The next item on the non-routine agenda can be found on page 57, Law Department Settlement Agreement and Release. The request is to approve a settlement agreement and release of plaintiff Steve Morse petition for attorney fees and costs stemming from a lawsuit against former Baltimore Police Department officers Justin Trojan and Jason Figueroa. Mr. Morse obtained a trial verdict against former officer Trojan in August of 2022. On behalf of the Law Department, we have our amazing Deputy Solicitor, Ms. Ebony Thompson. The floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. President and honorable members of the board. Ebony Thompson, Deputy City Solicitor and Interim Chief of Staff of the Mayor. This petition for attorney's fees, we're requesting authorization to approve a settlement for attorney fees and costs in the amount of $110,185.89 specifically, arising from a lawsuit brought against former officers Justin Trojan and Jason Figueroa, brought by Steve Morse. The plaintiff obtained a trial verdict against former officer Trojan in August of 2022. On or about, just by way of background, of May 16th, 2014, former officers Trojan and Figueroa responded to plaintiff's home as a result of a call for service. Plaintiff alleged that the officers, in particular Trojan, attacked him and used unnecessary and excessive force, leading to injuries including a broken tooth, a bone in his mouth, which required surgical repair, as well as injuries to his knee and wrist. Plaintiff was arrested and charged with second-degree assault, disorderly conduct, and alcohol and property damage charge, and 1 count of discharging an air gun. All charges against plaintiff were dismissed on or about July 23rd of 2014. Plaintiff then filed a federal civil case on or about May 15th, 2017, alleging both state tort claims and federal civil rights violations. In August of 2022, after a multi-day trial, the jury found former officer Trojan liable for a civil rights violation. The court entered a judgment of $51,250 against former officer Trojan, and plaintiff's counsel subsequently filed a timely motion for attorney's fees and costs, seeking a total of $144,380.39 for attorney's fees and expenses. The fees and expenses asserted in the motion are reasonable and well documented, and there's no legal basis to expect the court to reject or reduce the requested amount. But we were able to obtain a settlement of $110,000, $185.89, which represents in excess of a 20% reduction of that original fee amount. Based on the review by the Settlement Committee of the Law Department, a recommendation is made to the Board of Estimates to approve the settlement of the fee petition to avoid an expected higher award of fees and expenses. And I will note that as we continue to try this, the attorney's fees will continue to accumulate. I also want to note, as a matter of general perspective, when we are going throughout settlements where the Board of Estimates looks at some of our settlement numbers, we have to factor in, when we have these Section 1983 claims of civil rights violations, that even in this case, we can see it's in particular where the judgment was $51,250, but the attorney's fees are double. So we do have to factor that in when we are negotiating settlements. And at this time, I'll open open it up to the board for any questions that you may have, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Solicitor. One quick question. For the record, could you provide the employment status of both officers?
They are both former employees. They do not work for the police department, sir.
And just as a standard question of this board to the Law Department, do you know if they are eligible to collect their pension?
I do not know if they are able to collect their pension. I do not know that.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Mr. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one. You said that the federal case alleging the civil rights violations was originally filed in 2017?
Yes, sir, and exactly. And we believe that that's why we're saying the attorney's fees we feel are very reasonable, because a former attorney had the 3 years prior, so the fees were only for the last 10 months for this attorney. So.
Oh.
Yeah.
So this is just for the second attorney?
Yes.
So are we on the hook for the first attorney to come and present a petition for their fees?
I am not certain of that, sir.
Okay. Well, I mean, my question was just going to be, why did it take so long to come to trial?
Well, I believe that sometimes these things in terms of appeals and certain discovery matters, that they can get delayed, but I don't know the specifics as to why this one took so long. But I know that this was originally, this was originally actually out of an incident in 2014.
Right.
Then 2017, and they just got the trial verdict in 2022 of, I believe, August.
August, okay.
So.
Okay, thank you.
Hearing and seeing no additional questions or concerns at this time, we'll entertain a motion.
Move approval. Second.
It's moved and probably second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. The next item on non-routine agenda can be found on page 58, Law Department Settlement Agreement and Release. The settlement will conclude a suit brought by Rachel and Stephen Bloom based on an incident where Rachel was struck and injured by a DPW truck that was backing up at the Harbor Place Promenade. On behalf of the Law Department, we have our amazing Deputy Solicitor, Ms. Ebony Thompson. Please take us away.
Yes, sir. The board is requested to approve and authorize execution of a settlement agreement and release for a lawsuit against the city filed by Rachel Bloom and Stephen Bloom arising from an incident on August 11th, 2020, a motor vehicle accident on the Harbor Place Promenade in which Ms. Bloom was struck in the back and run over by a Department of Public Works pickup truck which was backing up. This is in the amount of, we are requesting $350,000, although the cap was $400,000. We were able to negotiate this down to $350,000. But by way of background, the plaintiff, Ms. Bloom, alleges that on August 11th, 2022, at approximately 8:30 a.m., she was walking from Harbor East along the promenade to the Maryland Science Center, and as she neared the Light Street Pavilion, she was struck from behind by a DPW solid waste pickup truck whose driver was backing up and unable to fully see behind him. A plaintiff was nearly crushed. Plaintiff suffered serious bodily injuries, including fracture of the right shoulder, punctured lung, displaced fractures of 8 ribs in her back, displaced fractures of 6 ribs on her side, severe bruising, lacerations, and contusions. Her husband, Stephen Bloom, also sued the city for his loss of consortium as a result of the accident. Based on the review by the Settlement Committee of the Law Department of the legal and factual issues specific to this particular claim, a recommendation to the Board of Estimates is made to approve the settlement of this claim. And we will note that there are, after speaking with DPW, we have confirmed, and I know that the Deputy Director will be able to answer any specific questions, although he's seated with you on the board. But the Law Department has been able to confirm that DPW no longer uses pickup trucks on the promenade. The crews use plastic push carts to collect the trash from the containers. And while the truck had a backup camera, there was not an alarm. That there was, also want to cite that there was a report that was completed. A DPW safety enforcement officer completed an on-site and post-accident report, which is standard policy. But any other questions related to that, we do have the Deputy Director here and would open it up to the board.
Thank you, Deputy Solicitor. At this time, are there any questions or concerns for the Law Department? Ms. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Well, I'm not sure if the Law Department's going to refer me to DPW on these, but we'll just dive in and we'll see what happens.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So first, was the DPW employee who drove the truck that injured Ms. Bloom, was that employee counseled, coached, or disciplined in any way after the incident?
I will refer that one to Deputy Director.
Based off the report, the employee was spoken to by staff. There was no disciplinary action in the file, though.
Okay, but some inspection, some level of investigation was done prior to or including speaking to the employee to ascertain whether the employee was at fault in any fashion.
That information was all compiled in the on-scene accident and then the after-action report.
Okay, is that consistent with procedure, or do procedures not cover this?
That's consistent.
That's consistent with procedure. Okay, put a pin in that one. Was the backup camera on the DPW truck operational on the day of the incident? I know that the Law Department reported that the backup alarm did not work, but was there a backup camera so that the driver in the cab could see what was directly behind them?
In the report, it says that there is a camera in the vehicle. I cannot recall if it was operational that day. I'd have to go back and look at the report itself.
Okay, so I think then this is the point where I pause and I say, can DPW send us a copy of the report?
I believe that's already with your office.
Okay, we got, okay. As a matter of course, does DPW perform safety inspections or checks on the vehicles each morning before starting service for the day?
Yes, that's standard policy.
So if the vehicle's backup alarm didn't work, why did the vehicle go out?
We'd have to look into that specific incident, but that should have been noted, obviously, in the pre-inspection reports. We'd have to just go and pull that up as well, too.
Okay. Other than the switch to the plastic pushcart method of collecting the trash specifically in the promenade area, has DPW taken any actions to ensure that this situation doesn't occur again anywhere that work vehicles are operating in an area designed for pedestrians?
So that policy change is the only one I'm familiar with. Obviously, the accident did happen back in 2020. That was prior to my arrival and the director's arrival, but we can take a look and see if we can follow up with any other additional next steps that came out from this incident.
This one's in all play. This is for both DPW and the law department. Can either of you share with the board any lessons learned from this incident that are going to govern changes in policies or procedures going forward?
May I take this one first? Yes, Mr. Comptroller. We are actively working on an accident review policy that's going to be not only for DPW, but for all of our agencies that have vehicles. And that is something that we have been working on and continue to work on. And it is multi-pronged. So law department, risk, and our agencies are involved. So that is definitely something we want to be able to prevent as many accidents as possible and have a proper method of accountability when they do happen, and they are preventable.
Could we have someone from my office sit in on that?
I don't see why not. More the merrier, sir.
Okay, well, we'll find you somebody. He said, looking specifically at a staff person in his office. Okay.
And also, if I may, Mr. Comptroller, just the previous question you asked the Deputy Director on the pre-inspections and the camera, if it wasn't working, why wasn't it out? From my understanding and my reading of the inspection report, it was never armed with a alarm. It was alarmed with it was equipped with a camera, but not necessarily an alarm. So even if they did the trek,
there just wasn't one.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't there. So I didn't want you to believe that they sent the vehicle out knowing that it wasn't working. It just was not there.
That's a completely different kind of disturbing then. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. I think that is, that's all the questions I have. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. At this time, are there any additional questions or comments from other members of the board? Hearing or seeing none, the board will entertain a motion.
I move approval. Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. The next item on non-routine agenda can be found on pages 59 and 60, Department of Finance, Payment in lieu of taxes. The board is asked to approve a pilot agreement for Woodland Gardens 1, located at 4755 Park Heights Avenue. On behalf of the Department of Finance, we have Mr. Sinema. I forgot your new title real quick. So what's your new title?
Deputy Finance Director.
Deputy Finance Director. There we go.
Hi, good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. Bob Senemy, representing Department of Finance this morning. This item we're asking for is a pilot agreement for a development called Woodland Gardens in Park Heights. The reason these come from the Department of Finance is we review these from the standpoint of, is a pilot needed to make the project financially feasible? In our judgment, and with the help of the Department of Housing, who manages these projects, we believe it is. And that's the item we're asking for today. I know the housing folks are here if you have any more specific questions on the details of the financing.
Yeah, Madam Commissioner, if you want to speak, or Ms. Alexandra, it's your show. Whatever you want to do.
Mr. President, I'm going to have Director Alex Hoffman present on behalf of the agency.
Okay.
On the specifics.
Hi, how are you?
And Deputy Finance Director, you're free to sit down if you want to. Thank you.
Alex Hoffman, Director of Project Finance for the Department of Housing and Community Development. The request before you is a pilot agreement for a project known as Woodland Gardens 1, located at 4755 Park Heights Avenue. The sponsor of the project is CHI, a nonprofit developer of affordable housing in Northwest Baltimore. The project is part of a twinning transaction with a project adjacent to it known as Woodland Gardens 2. Woodland Gardens 2 is a 75-unit senior building that's financed using 4% tax credits and is currently under construction. The action before you today is for Woodland Gardens 1, which is a 63-unit affordable family complex that would be directly adjacent. The unit mix includes a mix of both 1 and 2 bedroom units that serve a range of 30 to 60% of area median income. 13 of the units are supported by project-based vouchers through the Housing Authority and would be made available to residents with disabilities. The capital stack for the project includes a first mortgage of over $4 million, $2.9 million from the state of Maryland, anticipated financing through the Department of Housing and Community Development of Pimlico Community Development Authority funds of $1 million, and a grant of $500,000 from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund that would be presented to the board in a future action. There's also a seller's note related to the purchase of the land from the city of $238,000, grants from the Federal Home Loan Bank of Atlanta, the Franz Marek Foundation, and then sponsor contributions of a deferred developer fee of $257,000 and a sponsor loan of over $700,000. The syndication of the 9% tax credits, which is critical to the financial success of the project, raises over $14 million in equity for the project. As proposed, the pilot calculation is 5% of shelter rents, which is defined as the tenant-paid portion of the rent less any owner-paid utilities. In this instance, the owner anticipates paying for water and sewer, so that portion has been excluded from the estimate of the shelter rent calculation. The estimated net pilot payment for the project is $29,000.46 per year. That represents an estimated savings of $174,000 from the full tax payments for the property, which are estimated at just over $200,000 in the latest appraisal for the property. That savings to the project from the pilot supports over $2.5 million of the $4 million first mortgage, and is necessary in order for the project to proceed. So, just to kind of summarize the different findings that the Department of Housing makes in our recommendation to the Department of Finance on pilot matters. The project is necessary to create affordable housing. It will create 63 units of new affordable housing in Baltimore City. It is, the pilot as supporting over $2.5 million of the first mortgage is necessary for the project to proceed. And without the pilot, the project would have a gap that there's not a readily available source to support. And the project did exhaust other sources to make the project work prior to requesting the pilot, including sources both from the Housing Authority and the state, as well as from the Department of Housing and Community Development. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. At this time, are there any questions or concerns from members of the board? Not really many questions for me. Thank you again, Madam Commish, as well as Alex. Over the past 2 years, we've had a chance to talk about a lot of these types of deals. Just as a comment, my concern is particularly in an area like Park Heights, where we know there's been a tremendous amount of federal, state, and local disproportionate amount of disinvestment over the past couple of decades. And there's been a huge effort to go in communities like Park Heights to rid them of the decay and the debilitating state associated with the structures that have been there. And unfortunately, in what we're seeing of a lot of the development, it's just really replacing it again with concentrated poverty. Now, obviously, that is not the economic development solution or plan for Park Heights in its master plan, or that's the motivation of the administration. But unfortunately, those are the types of projects that we keep seeing over and over again. The one thing that I've talked to you, Madam Commissioner, and I'll continue to stress is particularly as it relates to when we put bids out, RFPs out, that we do it in a more thoughtful way, not just allowing developers to come to us with what they think should go there, but for us to do the real market research analysis to identifying the needs of the community and structuring the RFPs in a way where we ask developers to answer to specific characteristics associated with what we feel best will go in there. We understand and know that Baltimore has a very tried history as it relates to concentration of poverty. We see it when you drive block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood through the city. Obviously, again, that is not the intention of this administration, nor of this developer, but I am just concerned that we're starting to go back down that path if we are not more intentional, more creative, and more proactive in ensuring that those unintended consequences do not happen. What troubles me about developments like this, and we'll continue to work, and I appreciate, Madam Commissioner, you listening to me yesterday, is, when I see developments that say like Woodland Gardens 1 and Woodland Gardens 2 as developments, those things only happen symbolically in our communities, where there's a complete lack of creativity, there's a complete lack of thoughtfulness associated with the history, the culture, the individuals that might be for those particular areas. And we're like regurgitating this idea of project-based low-income housing units all over again. The assumption is if there was a building next to this, it would be called Woodland Gardens number 3, is kind of my point. And we don't necessarily see that in Canton or in Federal Hill or in other places that have a tremendous amount of development throughout our city. So I know that the Department of Housing, and I'll be very clear, just because now folks will come up with great names that will be tied to the culture and the history is not the point I'm getting at. It's not about being performative. It's just about being real thoughtful as it relates to ensuring that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck, and we do not have low expectations, particularly for marginalized communities that have already been severely impacted by the lack of thoughtfulness from city government, state government, and federal government. So with that said, I'm going to take my soapbox away. I'm going to get off of it. I know I've had really good discussions with Commissioner Kennedy. Look forward to working with the administration, look forward to partnering with the administration as we go forward. So thank you so much for your time today. Do you have anything to add, or are you good? Thank you so much. Are there any additional questions or concerns from members of this board? Hearing and seeing none at this time, I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval. Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. Again, Madam Commissioner, thank you so much for all your time in speaking with me regarding this item. The next item on the non-routine agenda can be found on page 65, Department of Finance. The request is to approve Baltimore City Public School System Capital Improvement Program for fiscal year 2024 through 2029. We have a number of folks here on behalf of Finance, Planning, and City Schools. Whoever would like to take the first stab at it. I see our Deputy CFO in front of us. So, Mr. Sinemi, the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you again. I can kick it off and then turn it over to others for details. But this item that's being requested, so the city charter requires the Board of Finance to endorse the capital plan for the city schools each year. That's the item that's in front of you. The Board of Finance is required to look at that because there are some borrowed funds in the capital plan, namely GO bonds that we issue each year for school projects. The rest of the capital plan is made up of state funds. So that's the item we're submitting today, and I know there's others on the call from either planning or schools that can speak to some of the details about the plan.
Before we do that, are there any questions or concerns for Finance at this point? Hearing and seeing none, are there representatives from planning or city schools that are either here or on meeting with us virtually that would like to speak at this time? If so, please unmute yourself and announce yourself.
So I don't have anything to say. I'm just here to answer questions, but I'm Lynette Washington, the Chief Operating Officer for Baltimore City Schools, and I'm joined with Maureen Gershberg, which is the Director of Facility Planning for City Schools. And so we are just here to address any questions.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for, well, before we do that, is there anyone else on from planning or another agency that would like to want to address this board on behalf of this item?
Hi, this is Kristen Ahern from the Department of Planning. I'll just note that the Planning Commission reviewed and approved this request for a 6-year CIP from City Schools, and we support the request.
Thank you. Anyone else meeting with us virtually who would like to announce themselves? Hearing and seeing none at this time, I'll turn it back over to the board. Are there any questions or concerns for planning or city schools? Mr. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the issues that every elected official in the city has heard from constituents about for years is the importance of air conditioning in all city school buildings. Although I suppose at this point in the year, we should also be making sure we have good working heat in all city school buildings as well. The presentation that City Schools made to the Board of Finance indicates that as of September 12th of this year, 16 out of 75 air conditioning projects have been completed. Is that correct? That number felt low, and I'm wondering if maybe we had the wrong takeaway from the presentation.
Yeah, so one of the things I will say, it's almost the reverse. So about 7 years ago, we had 75 schools that didn't have air conditioning. To date, we're at 14 schools that do not have air conditioning. All of these schools have some type of plan. So either they are in design, in construction, or they're pending based off of a major school construction project.
Okay, that makes, so what's the timeline for final completion of the remaining 14 projects? By what date will you be able to say, or do you expect to be able to say, that every school now has working air conditioning?
Yeah, and so the timeline will be the completion of the last schools that are a part of the Build to Learn Act construction project. And so those would be our high schools. And I'm gonna ask Maureen, do you know what is the final date for our high school plan?
Right now so Poly and Western will be done in 2028. Technically they'll have AC in their swing space though. So in terms of schools that currently don't have it, City College will move into swing space and they'll have window units in their swing space or an equivalent, but the new building will open, it's supposed to open in 2027 right now. So 2027, 2028 are when the final schools will open for Build to Learn. Okay,
so if we think about it in terms of what's the furthest out point at which there will be any city school students in buildings that don't have working AC, that will be as soon as City College swings into its swing space before its building actually gets the completed renovations, so 27.
Yeah, and I do want to provide clarity. Okay. So and one of the statements you said is working air conditioning. So we have a portfolio of buildings and we are in a district where we're not completely funded in order for our capital renewal program. Yeah. And so one of the things that we do flag is that every year we will flag schools that are going under repairs. So to address the question, these are all schools that will have air conditioning. In terms of the conditions of the air conditioning, that is all contingent on whatever schools may be having repair issues at that particular time. But all of these schools will have air conditioning by the date that that Maureen just indicated, so 2027 and 2028.
Okay, Madam CEO, let me be perfectly clear. This is not meant as a criticism of, I get that you guys are making, bricks with less straw. It's just, I'm just trying to get a timeline that we can, look to so that if we are not seeing the progress towards that we can help in the advocacy of the additional resources needed to make sure that our kids are able to go to school and the level of comfort needed for actual learning. So I got you. I got you. I think that was my only question, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. At this time, are there any additional questions or concerns from other members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, the board will entertain a motion.
Move approval. Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. The next item on non-routine agenda can be found on pages 85 through 87, Baltimore City Health Department. This request is to note the Health Department's updated work plan summary. On behalf of the Baltimore City Health Department, I believe we have someone with us virtually.
Yes. Good morning.
If you could please announce yourself and go right into your presentation.
Yes, good morning, Mr. President, Honorable City Council. My name is Leslie Thompson. I'm the Chief of Finance for the Health Department. As an update to our work plan, we are continuously working on onboarding our 2 new staff members to get them acclimated with the BOE process so that we can continuously work on our backlog of agreements. And we are moving in the right way and making good progress. We do have one more recruitment that we're working on, and we made a selection, and the offer has been extended. The start date is pending for that new recruitment. We finalized our SOP for BOE submission in our agency. That implementation is expected to get started 12/1/22. We've also, as I said previously, that we applied for an infrastructure award. And however, we haven't gotten our award notice yet, but we do feel confident that we will be receiving these funds to build the public infrastructure within our department. We're continuously moving in the right direction, and we're making progress. And that pretty much sums it up as it relates to our updates.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. At this time, are there any questions or concerns from members of this board? Ms. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Ms. Thompson. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. So I just want to make sure that I'm hearing what you're saying right. On page 85 of the agenda, Health Department mentions that a 3rd staff member would be brought on board on September 15th, 2022, to work with contract management and preparing items for submission. Was that the position you were talking about? So that has not yet happened, but you are expecting that in how long?
We're expecting it early December, probably the 1st or 2nd week in December.
You're expecting to onboard them in early December?
Correct.
Okay. And what is the timeline for completing the training of that employee and the 2 others who started back in the week of August 15th? Or are those 2 already spun up to speed?
They're pretty much brought up to speed,
Okay.
but there is a learning curve because there's a lot of information that needs to be articulated to them, communicated to them. So therefore, it's ongoing.
Okay.
So it's always changing, it's always evolving.
The department also anticipated training 5 existing staff to help with the backlog of getting grant agreements to the board for approval by October 31st, 2 weeks ago. Does the backlog still consist of almost 40 agreements, or has that been reduced?
That has been reduced. I will have to get back to you with an approximate number, but that has been reduced.
Okay, if you could get back to Jim Knighton in my office with that number. Okay, and what is the current projection that the department has for when that backlog will be eliminated entirely?
We are shooting, our goal is to have it completed by the end of the year. That is our goal.
All right. On page 87, the health department lays out its plan to create 15 administrative positions, hire a consultant firm to assist in developing finance and audit policies and procedures, and procure a contract management system. Can you give us an update on the status of those efforts, or is there somebody else who should be updating us on that part?
Well, as it relates to that, that's basically under us getting the award from CDC for the infrastructure improvement. We're confident that we're going to get it. We just have to get our notice of award. So once that award has been given to us, then we're going to fast speed ahead and getting those pieces of or those components developing on the way.
Okay, so you can't start posting those positions, or well, can you start creating the positions now and just not hire them until you've got the commitment of the funding?
We can start preliminary work in terms of building the position descriptions and things of that nature. However, we can't go forward with creating until funding has been identified.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, let me put a pin in that. And that's a different kind of pun. I just made a pin pun. Right? Hey, okay. This is funny for like 74 people total in all city government. All right. And a lot of them are here. And then finally, can anyone in the department, or can you speak to any elements of the work plan that have already resulted in notable improvements or successes over the last 3 months?
I think the fact that we brought on 2 new people was a big hump for us in a short amount of time. And that's really helping us get through that backlog, getting those additional staff members that we really needed.
Okay. All right, circling back, and I think this is less for you and more for the city administrator. I understand Human Resources has the policies and the procedures it has. I'm wondering if there is some way in which, in a situation like this, the need to have the funding identified and already approved, if that need could be waived for the because there's a lot of work that goes into creating the positions. But then once the positions are created, there's still the issue of actually posting for them and hiring people, and then I don't know if Mr. Senemy is still here, paying them, which is the part you can't do until you have the money. But if they're confident that they're going to have the money, can we get HR to let them start the fairly extensive work time-wise of creating the positions now, so that when the money shows up, they can move immediately into the hiring phase?
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller, for the question. I think Ms. Thompson answered the question well. The process of creating position descriptions and laying out the description of the positions is an extensive process and one that takes time. And so if she is starting there, my hope is that by the time those positions are certified, that we'll be in a position to have clarity around the funding.
Okay, so you're already starting with that part of figuring out the specifics of the positions and the requirements and all of that backup information that HR is going to need to actually create the positions.
Yes, correct. That was part of our proposal when we submitted it to the CDC.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll stop there, and I've made all the pin puns I can think of for one meeting. So, Ms. Thompson, thank you very much for this update, and we look forward to seeing you or someone else from Health back in a little while to let us know how things are going.
Thank you very much.
So this is an item that the Health Department brought to us just for clarity and making sure that we're in agreement that they've been consistent with what they said they would do in the past. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to just note the report from the Baltimore City Health Department.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The report will be noted. Next up, On the non-routine agenda can be found on pages 99 to 100, the Mayor's Office of Infrastructure Development. The board is requested to approve a resolution relating to the membership of the Design Build Executive Committee. On behalf of the Mayor's Office of Infrastructure Development, we have Director Matthew Garbach to present. Before he begins, I would like to thank Director Garbach for taking the time earlier this week, as we've done many times in the past, of meeting with me and kind of in sheer detail going through, I guess, the plan, where clarity is always the goal and normally achieved. So at this time,
Mr. President, just really quickly, Mr. Garbach presented at the previous meeting, and so I was going to ask if he could. Is there new information to?
No.
Okay, so he doesn't have to go through the whole thing again.
No.
Okay.
Can I finish?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Controller. So at this time, we'll turn it over to Mr. Garbach.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Controller, honorable members of the board. For the record, I'm Matt Garbach, Director of the Mayor's Office of Infrastructure Development. Also, for the record, I was among the 74 people who appreciated the pin pump. Exactly, especially from DPW. Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. President, we did have the opportunity to chat and talk about the process. You had raised some issues about the different approaches where there are 3 different approaches for how the contracts would be developed. One would be a one-step low bid, another would be a 2-step low bid, and then the last one would be a best value approach. And I believe your concerns were over that process, what went into it, and making sure that it was truly fair, open, and accessible and transparent. One of the things that this process, it's not being changed in this resolution. It's in the existing process, but there will be 2 times when these types of contracts come to the board. When an agency wants to do a design-build contract, they have to prepare a proposal, bring it to the design-build executive committee. The executive committee will then determine whether or not it should go forward. At that point, the proposal has to come to this board. The board has to approve the advertisement of that, so the board will know what the approach is, the justification for it, as well as the proposed grading and rubric. So that will be an opportunity to discuss that at that time. Once it's advertised, it will then have to come back to the board for actual approval of the contract. And I can commit to the board that, given that this is a new process, that either my office or one of the agencies will commit to briefing the board members in advance of proposals coming to the board so that you are fully aware of what they're coming, why they're coming, and the justification for that. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
No, thank you so much. And just for the general public's knowledge, what Mr. Garbach just went over is important, and here's why. What this board did not want to put the position of the city in is knowing that we're going to get a good amount of money that's going to come into the city from an infrastructure perspective. What the board was concerned with is with the 1-step or potentially 2-step process of already having contractors that are embedded in our city, have the relationships, the accessibility, and just doing these design build contracts at a very large scale level without providing any level of market research analysis to determine if there's other vendors that could potentially help and be supportive of it. Design build is used not really in the city of Baltimore, but definitely at our state level and throughout this country. And it is there are slippery slopes that you could get into when you put a design build contract out there for a particular disciplinary, and just 1, 2, or 3 folks have like that contract for a significant amount of time, and with this knowing the significant amount of money. So what we do know is that prior to the RFP going on the street, that this board will get to approve and be able to dialogue and debate any concerns around size, scope, as well as the approach that the bid is going to take. So with that, we really appreciate, again, your responsiveness in walking us through that. I would think that another point to provide clarity, the city can already do design builds. We really never do design builds. We've jumped on the state design builds in the past. The one change that we provide in this resolution is just really the configuration of the board.
Correct, yes.
And ensuring that Mr. Director Garbach manages this project appropriately. So we appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
At this time, are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move approval. Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The item is approved. The next group of items on the non-routine agenda can be found on pages 170, 171, and 172, Bureau of Risk Management. These are requests to approve a renewal of flood insurance coverage for various properties owned by the mayor and city council of Baltimore. As I believe the concerns that have been raised by Comptroller wishes to address our comment to each of these properties, I propose that we discuss them collectively, and at time, if we want to pull a particular property out, we can do so. Are we in agreement to do that? We are. So at this time, on behalf of Bureau of Risk Management, or we're going to have, again, Deputy CFO Sidney, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning. Thanks again. We also have Sean K. Stanley on the line, who is the Director of the Bureau of Risk Management. I just wanted to kick it off. We're asking for renewal for 2 flood insurance policies. The background on this is that FEMA requires properties that fall within certain hazard areas to be insured for flood. The city has a number of properties that fall into that category. There are 2 items. There are 2 different insurers, Wright and Willis. One is for $222,000, another for $59,000. Also want to just thank the Comptroller's Office, because we did have to kind of rush this onto the agenda. The dynamic here is that when we actually get the quote, they require payment within 30 days. So depending on the board's schedule, sometimes we've got to move quickly, especially if there's like a holiday or something. And so that's why we rush that one on. But if there are any questions, again, I asked Sean Kay, who's here on the screen, if folks have any questions about the specifics.
Mr. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. The board memos for all of these items indicated that the policy renewals were being presented to the board late because of staffing changes. And so the first question is the timely renewal of these insurance policies the responsibility of one position in the office that changed, or are there multiple staff members who are responsible? And if so, can someone from risk management talk about what staffing changes happened and how they resulted in the delay?
Sure. So I'll ask Sean Kay is on the call if you want to take that one.
Good morning, everyone. Sean K. Stanley, Bureau of Risk Management. Initially, this was the responsibility of one individual. Understanding that it is a huge undertaking, we have decided to spread out the task so that everyone takes a part in it. We also are working to secure additional staff so that we can further make sure that we are processing these in as timely a manner as we can so that we can avoid this challenge in the future.
Okay, so for the sake of perspective and for the public's understanding, could you walk us through the process of procuring an insurance policy for the city?
Absolutely, absolutely. So contrary to public belief, securing business insurance is much different than securing your homeowners and personal auto. So you can't go online and do a spec quote and then you pop out some type of policy. You actually have to go through an insurer. And just a side note, I underwrote policies for like 20 years, so I'm pretty familiar with the process. But what we have to do is we get information from our insurance broker, which is Willis. Willis will provide us with any subjectives or questions that the carrier has prior to even issuing a quote, because as we know, rates change from year to year, the appetite of the market changes, and it's changed tremendously with COVID. The other part of that is that in the process of getting the subjectives, they will not issue a quote until the last minute. Most carriers take a longer time with underwriting these larger policies, such as municipalities, large organizations, because there's lots of information that needs to be gathered. So to answer your question, with the process, it's more so just the back and forth between the carrier and the city, which is germane to this type of risk. It's always understood that this is what happens. To speed up the process, we don't have, we're not able to speed up what the insurer does, but we try to get the information as soon as possible. So I hope that helps. And then just one piece, if I can add, please, when it comes to the flood insurance. With the flood insurance, because the map changes year to year and sometimes month to month, the flood insurer will come to us, and before even issuing the quote or the policy, they want additional information. And once they issue it, they want the payment right then and there. For our smaller premiums, we can push that through and we can get the payments and turn them around. But for these larger ones, we have to come to the board. And just based on the process and the board's schedule, we're always going to have some type of lag just because of how this process is.
So how do you, I'm not even sure which question to ask first. Who selects which carriers to get quotes from?
The insurance broker.
The broker.
So it's the insurance, yes, the broker. It's the broker's job to shop our coverage to the insurers.
And the broker that you have a contract with, that's where periodically we put out an RFP to get a broker, and one is selected through an open competitive process.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. And then, but once we've selected the broker through an open competitive process, the broker pretty much is doing select source in terms of going out and finding which carriers we're going to get quotes from and eventually choose.
Absolutely, that's correct.
And then I think the last question I have now is, according to the Board of Estimates databases, the city's cyber liability policy was effective through November 1, 2022. Is the renewal for that policy already in place? And if so, when are we going to see that come to the board?
I have to check on that. If I can come back to you, I know there were some subjectives that were needed for the cyber liability, but I believe that we received those and we're just waiting for a response from the insurer to say that we can bind coverage, and then you will see the board memo from there. And if I could just add one more piece, I'm sorry, I'm giving you a lot of information. Part of the other part of the process is, since you mentioned cyber, is that we have to go to our partners and other agencies to secure information. So then they have to give us updates on what's going on. And while BSID has done an awesome job with many of the updates that they're making to secure the city's websites, sometimes the carrier comes back and they want a little more, and then they want more detail. And so that also causes a delay because there's the back and forth and sort of the battle of getting the coverage secured.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. President. That's all the questions I had.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. At this time, are there any additional questions or concerns from members of this board? Hearing and seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval. Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. The next item on the non-routine agenda can be found on page 179, Law Department. This request is to approve and authorize a consultant agreement with FMI Capital Investors Incorporated. We had deferred this item previously to allow for the outcome of the vote on a charter amendment to prohibit the sale of municipal conduit system. That charter amendment has been passed and will take effect soon. At this time, I'd like to recognize a representative from the Law Department to again walk us through this agreement and provide any feedback or insight that might have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. President, honorable members of the board. As we discussed several weeks ago, the law is seeking the board's approval of an agreement to engage a consultant. In this case, it's FMI Capital Advisors, to assist the city in evaluating its conduit system. This would include a value in light of the current and projected future condition of the conduit, obviously taking into account the inalienability under the charter amendment that recently passed, as well as how that could best be monetized. We know that the cost for this aging infrastructure is increasing over time because the system in general is 100 years old, give or take. And the revenue has decreased as less people are seeking to use space in the conduit. They want, as we mentioned before, towers or street boring or, ground installations of some kind above ground. And revenue may also decrease as we consider what it means now that the city can no longer grant franchises for conduit use. So we really face the problem pre and post charter amendment that that the city can't increase its rates high enough to cover our rising costs. The biggest user, BGE, can't just pay whatever we throw out. The Public Service Commission has a role there in approving those rates. And even if we could increase it to a number that would cover all of our costs, that's probably something that would get dumped directly on city BGE users. So given that this is the situation, that the conduit will continue to lose money, we sort of sought professional guidance on options from advisors who know this type of asset and who know what other cities have done with respect to their asset. The valuation of the conduit will help the city determine, what is paid in the market for conduit space of a similar condition. It'll help us understand what amount of capital improvement to make, what makes the most financial sense. You don't want sort of the law of diminishing returns and over-improving something that you're not getting a return on. And as we noted before, we considered a range of possible consultants, but we went with FMI because of its experience in conduit and the fact that it had a flat fee and not an hourly rate. So if it comes up with some arrangement that it can find to help us monetize, help us better, maintain or whatever for the conduit, something perhaps similar to what other cities do, then it might get a percentage. And that's a huge incentive for it to find something that will help us. But only then. Short of finding anything, if there isn't anything to be found, then it's simply this flat fee. So we're not sort of wasting money on an hourly rate. DOT certainly has consultants, but their most recent review, I think, was sort of a 2-page note, and it kind of projected the status quo and really didn't take into account the fact that the charter amendment was going to make the operation use of the conduit different than what it had been in the past. So, this consultant will sort of help us understand what options there are in the current market with the restrictions we're facing. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much. Just real quick for the record. So when, I guess this was brought to the board maybe 5-6 weeks ago, I'm not sure. The motivation of the administration at the time wasn't to race it through where at this point, if we would have approved it then, we would have an agreement in place and a recommendation in place, correct? We didn't expect to have a recommendation in place in 5 or 6 weeks, right?
No, absolutely not. No.
So I just want to clarify for the record. So delaying it until after the wishes of the citizens of Baltimore and the charter was passed, nothing has changed from the city's perspective, from the administration's perspective, other than maybe the loss of 4 or 5 weeks associated with it being passed today.
Right, and it's clear that now, the options that this consultant might provide us with are shaped by what the charter amendment dictates.
So it actually provides a certain level of clarity for them because now they don't have to necessarily, if they started 5 weeks ago, take a couple different approaches or a couple of different paths. The charter is passed at this point. They know exactly the path that they're going to have to go down and provide analysis and feedback to us with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they always had, obviously, the looming charter amendment in mind either way, but certainly, I don't know, their recommendation could be, a different charter amendment in the future.
Understood. I just wanted to make sure we laid out that nothing has really changed from the deferral from then until now. I know that there was a lot in the testimony that talked about potential loss of revenue, the issue with the franchise. That wouldn't have been changed in the 4 or 5 weeks that we have deferred.
I mean, if they had found something that was time limited in that time, perhaps. I don't know. I mean, I can't really speak to what they would have done had this been approved earlier.
Yeah, I think the likelihood of what we see contracts happen in the city of Baltimore, like 4 or 5 weeks for something that intense probably would not have happened. And I certainly don't think that was the motivation of the administration to try to push or rush it through in that short time window that they provided the board to kind of even evaluate this. The only other thing I'll say about the current agreement is, say for instance, they come back with this idea that we should sell the network, right? And I know that the current agreement is for $50,000 as a lump sum, and then potentially an incentive if we, I guess, take their advice and sell. They get, 2%, or I can't really remember what the percentage was. Is that indefinite? I mean, how does that work? So if they come back and say, hey, City of Baltimore, we think you should sell your network for $170 million, and then in 15 years we sell it for $300 million. Do they still have access, or is there some time clock associated with this agreement?
Well, just to be clear, it's a percentage of a deal that they would bring us. So they'd have to be the entity bringing us some sort of deal. So it's not advice. You know, they have to be the one
They're
that
kind of like the broker. So
right.
They come up with the solution and they broker it out.
Right. If they are part of the player, if they dissolve or something, and 30 years from now we were to do something. But also, to your point, it's not just a percentage of a sale. It would be a percentage of some sort of deal. And obviously, with the charter amendment the way it is, that's not what we're looking at in the short term. They're going to need to come up with something, some sort of private-public partnership, something that might be able to fit into what the narrow box the charter has. And I think that's their incentive, is to try to find something that could help us with a diminishing asset that isn't a sale and that is going to sort of enhance our position. But again, I mean, the board has to approve something like that before they would ever get any kind of profit from it.
Understood. Now, is there any language of exclusivity in the deal? Meaning, if they presented us with a deal, would the city be in a position to entertain other competitive offers?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that you no contract can tie your hands. If you want to select something, agree to that or not. It's just simply if the board feels that particular deal that they've been brought from FMI is the way to go, then there's a percentage. There's no way that they could tie your hands in terms of what you're able to do. And
so there couldn't be language in the contract that provides exclusivity for them to be the broker of this type of deal?
No, I don't think we would.
I'm not. I haven't read through the contract. I mean, I don't have. That's why I'm asking your expert opinion.
Yeah, I don't know that we would approve some sort of legal agreement.
I guess the question is, there is not any exclusivity language in this.
Well, even if there were, it couldn't operate to bar your choices. You always have the choice whether to take their deal or not, or do something wholly different. I don't think a contract could restrict your rights as the board to determine what to do.
Okay. Are there any other questions or concerns? Ms. Comptroller?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Good morning.
Hey.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember from the last conversation what it is exactly that keeps BGE from simply having to pay a fair franchise fee. Like, what is it that keeps us from saying, listen, we need to charge X in order to maintain the conduit, you need to pay X? What keeps them from just having to accept that?
Right. So it's probably a two-pronged answer. One, we tried that. We ended up in litigation. They can't just pay a rate without the Public Service Commission approving it. So they do like every 2 years
Wait,
or something.
Pause for a second.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, right. What the Public Service Commission has to approve is not them paying the rate. It's if they want to raise their charges in order to cover the additional cost, they would have to go to the Public Service Commission. But if they just ate it as additional overhead, if they just ate that difference, they wouldn't have to go to the PSC, right?
I don't know what their board requires them to do with respect to their costs, but last time we tried it, they sued us. So, okay. I mean, it's not like we can just hand out a $5 per foot rate and expect them to, it's not going to happen. I mean, we're not going to be able to just throw out that rate and expect them to pay it.
I guess I'm a little confused by what makes this situation different than any other property owner saying, yeah, I'm going to rent this house for $1,000 a month because that's what I need to pay the debt service on it and the maintenance on it. And a prospective tenant, or even the current tenant, takes us to court and says, I can't pay $1,000 a month, so you're going to have to charge me less. That's weird, and that's what I'm trying to ask. What makes the situation different such that they get to do that?
They have a law, a franchise law from the General Assembly that says they have the right to be there, and the cost is what we agree on.
Okay.
So both parties have to agree on the rate.
So this is a state law.
Absolutely.
That in theory could be altered by the General Assembly?
I don't know if that's the case, because it gives them a property right. And so to create a law that impairs their property right.
But it's impairing our property right.
Yep.
Okay, well,
right.
we're going to
So,
put a pin in that
I
one
mean,
also.
that's-
Okay,
that's just a
but it's not funny this time. All right.
Sorry.
Okay, let me move on to the second part of this. The part of the contract that concerns me is the 2% incentive,
right,
for them to make most of their money as a fee on bringing us a good deal.
Right.
So bear with me. Let's say hypothetically, we cut a deal with BG&E where we don't charge them anything. They get some, like we agree on some percentage of the conduit that they just get to use. And instead of paying us any franchise fee, they're just responsible for maintaining the conduit. And they don't pay us anything. They just maintain the conduit because they need the conduit to work. They need the conduit to be in good shape, so it's in their interest for it to be maintained. What if they did that and we keep the other 3/4 of the conduit to do our own franchises with other people, and that's how the city made money off the conduit? That would be a good deal for the city, right?
I'd have to know the terms, you know.
Well, those were the terms. Like that's just it. They don't charge it. They're just fully 100% responsible for the maintenance of the conduit.
Right, and it's maintenance at the level that they want for their things. What does that do for us in terms of our responsibility to other users and the kind of maintenance they want? I mean, the devil's kind of in the details there.
But here's my point. My point is, even if that is a good deal for the city, technically the city isn't making anything off of BG&E.
Well, we're getting the cost of maintenance.
Well, would that be something where this firm could charge us 2% of what we save?
No.
Right, exactly. So my point is, this firm is financially disincentivized by the terms of this contract from bringing us a deal like that.
But they don't. We wouldn't need them to get a deal like that. I mean, we can talk to BGE on our own. In fact, by law, we have to. We have to agree with BGE on future rates and terms. So that has to exist whether we had a consultant or not. What we're looking for the consultant to do is bring us the stuff that has nothing to do with our current users. What are other cities doing that are similar? What are they doing to monetize? What is the value of the asset, and what are reasonable rates? Because otherwise, it's just us and BGE spitballing some ideas, which we are required by law to do anyway. We have to enter into agreements with them because that's what the ancient 18 whatever law said. They have the permanent right to be underground, but then we must, as parties, agree to those terms. So that would happen regardless of FMI.
So let's say this company looks around and the deals other cities are doing fall into two categories: sales, which are now prohibited, and more creative, out-of-the-box things like the one I just described, but where the cities don't get a big cash payday out of it. They simply are released from the liability of continued maintenance costs. Even if that's what would be best for us from a pure policy perspective, the incentive feature to this contract disincentivizes this consultant from bringing us those kinds of deals. And so what I continue to push for the administration is, now that we know that selling the conduit is not an immediate option under any circumstance, that the fastest this could be done is 2 years from now, after we pass another charter amendment obviating the one we just passed. Since we know we've got 2 years to work with, why not pull back this particular contract and work out a contract that is, possibly more expensive because it would be based on hours of work, but would get us a more objective result in terms of giving the consultant free rein to pick what is really the best deal for us and not the best deal for them as it comes to us.
And I think we were just thinking that's your job. You pick the best deal for us. The consultant here is just looking for the monetary part. There might be all other things we could do with this conduit. And obviously, the consultant isn't going to be presenting deals about a sale because that can't happen. So they're only for that little narrow portion of what is the value of this? What do other cities do to monetize it? And if there is something, then they're not just an advisor. They're bringing someone to us that might help us.
But you already said in the earlier remarks that it's entirely possible that their recommendation might be you should change your charter again so that you can do sales, so that you can do this great sales deal that we're offering.
Right, but that's up to you. If you say no, then they don't get any money. I mean, that's kind of the point. They're not taking over advising you as to everything you could do with the conduit. They're literally a financial advisor to try to figure out the cost benefit for this particular thing. They're not the sum total of the analysis.
Yeah, I think the concern is, we should never have a consultant that is incentivized to give us advice on one particular action. And I think that's if we eliminated the 2% out, that was always my gripe and my concern. I appreciate you saying you and addressing us as a board, but this is a board and the configuration is pro administration. It's 3 out of 5 votes. So clearly, I think myself and Comptroller Henry have had some concerns with this since it was brought to us a couple weeks ago. We're still going to have those same concerns. The real concern is that FMI, or whoever the contractor is, brings some flashy proposal to the board. I get to defer it, he gets to defer it, but eventually it's going to get passed, right? So the idea that we would eventually, because of the 3 out of 5 votes, the idea that eventually we're going to get a chance to kind of reject it or figure out what the best offer is I guess where our concern is about it. So I don't know, are there any additional questions, concerns, or comments regarding it? At this time, I'll entertain a motion. If
Move
not,
approval. Second.
It's been moved and probably seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
I'm nay. So please note that it's a 3-2 vote with 2 nays coming from Comptroller Henry and myself, President of City Council. Thank you so much, Hillary, for your presentation. The item has been approved. So now we have a couple walk-on items that the clerk noted at the beginning. There are 3 of them from the Department of Transportation. Those 3 items are page 181, Department of Transportation ratification and amendment of number 1 of a memorandum of understanding. Page number 182, Department of Transportation transfer of funds for change order number 2 on project TR03319 bridge construction management service for replacement of bridge number 3112 Harford Road over Herring Run. And then the last one is page 183, Department of Transportation extra work number 2 with Rummel, Klepper, and Call LLP. For the benefit of the public, we do have someone on from DOT to provide information or background on this item and walk us through. Is anyone here from DOT?
Is this the one that got moved to routine? Didn't we move some of them to routine?
Yeah, Mr. President, this was an error in our office, so if the board so chooses, it can be moved to routine. We did not receive any questions.
But, okay, so at this point, I guess I'm going to entertain a motion that this be, at this point, we're not in routine, we're in non-routine, so we can just vote on it, I think, if you guys are okay with that. I think that's the best course of action. Yeah. So at this point, if there aren't any questions or concerns from administration, I'll entertain a motion. What we're going to do is we're going to vote, unless there's some unreadiness, we're going to vote on all 3 as a package. So the 3 welcome items from DOT we'll vote on as a package. I'll entertain a motion to do so.
Move approval. Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. So just for the record, the items that I listed at the beginning of this topic on page 181, 182, and 183, we just voted on as a package. All three items were walk-on, and we voted them in non-routine, and we voted out as approved. The next two items are walk-on items as well. Both of these items relate to water main infrastructure work being done at Lake Montebello. We're all aware of the emergency sinkhole situation there and has caused disruptions to our water services and surrounding communities. Once again, I propose to hear these items together. If there is some level of unreadiness, we could separate them out. Hearing and seeing none, we're going to kind of talk about them together. Those items are on page 184 and 185, Department of Public Works. Amendment number 3 to agreement with Pure Technologies. And the second item is on page 186, Department of Public Works, transfer of funds on behalf of DPW. We have Brian Ball here to walk us through these items. Mr. Ball, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Council President and board members. I'm Brian Ball. I'm the Chief of the Office of Asset Management for DPW. So the item before the board is an amendment to an existing agreement with Pure Engineering Services. This agreement has been in place since 2016. Pure Engineering Services provides condition assessment of our large diameter water transmission mains throughout the city and the county. The agreement is currently through 2024, and this will extend the agreement through 2025 and add $14 million in funds to fund the next 2 years of work. We are asking that this be walked on at this time due to the sinkhole at Lake Montebello. There is an 84-inch large water main that has been exposed by that sinkhole, and we would like the availability of Pure Engineering Services to perform inspections on that sinkhole.
Thank you, Mr. Chief. At this time, are there any questions, concerns from members of this board? Hearing and seeing none, I entertain a motion.
I move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and probably second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. As there's no new business before the desk, the board will adjourn until bid opening at noon. The next regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Estimates will occur on Wednesday, December the 7th at 9 a.m. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. Baltimore, we absolutely love you.
Are we ready? Okay. And Charm TV is right on the dot, too. Okay. Good morning, or afternoon, rather, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Estimates bid opening for November 16th, 2022. I'm Celeste Amato, Clerk of the Board, and I am joined by a number of my colleagues, Jalen Sanders, James Knighton, and Sherelle Holly, all of whom will be helping us move through the process of opening the bids today. First, I would like to share a few bid opening dates that have changed. First up, we have an item from Transportation. It's contract number TR12309. This is replacement of bridge number BC5202 on Wilkins Avenue over the Gwynns Falls. Its due date was originally today, but the new opening date is now December 7th, 2022. I also want to highlight a few bid opening dates that we changed this morning at the Board of Estimates meeting, just because there were some dates provided in the original advertisements in error. First was a DPW bid SC983R. That bid opening date is January 11th, 2023. And second, another Public Works item, WC1257. That opening date is now February 1st, 2023. And those, of course, will be corrected with new advertisements and posted in all the usual places. Okay, so we have two bids to open today, and I believe the first one up is for Recreation and Parks, contract number RP21820, Chick Webb Recreation Center. And Jim, I'm guessing these are going to be big numbers with bonds.
Yes. The first submission is from CAM Construction Company, Inc. CAM Construction Company, Inc. Total bid price, $15,596,406.00.
Okay, Jalen, I'm going to repeat that number. It's 15,596,406.00.
Yes, that's the appropriate number.
Great.
We have one duplicate
Thank you.
and one original.
Yes, and bid bond is included.
Great. That was CAM Construction Company, Inc., $15,596,406.
Next submission is from MCN Build Incorporated. That's letter M, letter C, letter N, Build Incorporated. Total bid price, $15,680,000.00.
Okay, let me repeat that number back. It's a 15,680,000.00.
Yes, yes.
Great. And we have a bid bond.
Bid bond is included.
And it's one original, one duplicate.
That was MCN Build, Inc., and the bid amount was $15,680,000.
Okay, the next submission is from Plano Cowden Construction. Total bid price, $17,600,000 and 0 cents.
Okay, I'm going to repeat that number back. 17,600,000.00.
Yes.
And we have a bid bond.
Bid bond is included, yes.
And it's two duplicates.
Original plus 2. Okay, that was Plano Cowden Construction, $17,600,000.
Okay, this is the last submission for this solicitation. Bidder is Towson Mechanical Incorporated. Total bid price, $13,700,000 and 0 cents.
I'm going to read that number back. 13,700,000.00.
Yes. Bid bond is included.
And do we have multiple copies?
Yes, two.
Original plus 2. That was Towson Mechanical, Inc., $13,700,000.
Yes.
And that was our final bid for
It was.
RP 21820?
Yes.
All right. And our last opening for today is Department of Transportation, contract number TR 18301, intersection safety improvements. And our first bidder.
First bidder is Civil Construction, LLC. Total bid price, $3,577,041.25 and 25 cents.
Oops. Bear with me. Jim, could you repeat that? My laptop, I'm having trouble making the numbers stick in the column. There's some kind of formatting going on.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Sure.
In
So
fact, I'm going to create a second column to deal with it. Okay. Go one more time. I'm sorry.
Sure. Just repeating, this is Civil Construction, LLC. Total bid price, $3,577,041, so 041.25.
Okay, I'm going to read that number back to you. 3,577, 041.25.
Yes.
Okay, that was Civil Construction LLC. $3,577,041.25.
Yes,
Yes.
and we have one duplicate and one original.
And was this a bond?
Yes, and the bid bond is included.
Okay. Hang on just one second, Jim. I'm fixing this column situation. Okay, thank you. I'm ready.
Okay. Next bidder is P. Flanagan and Sons Incorporated. Total bid price, $3,286,050.00.
And I'm going to repeat that number back, 3,286,050.00.
Yes.
Yes. We have one duplicate, one original.
Bid bond included.
Thank you. Okay, that was Flanagan and Sons, $3,286,050.
The next bidder is Allied Contractors Incorporated. Total bid price, $4,976,596.50.
Okay, that number was 4,976,596.50.
Yes.
Okay.
Bid bond is included.
We have one duplicate, one original.
Okay, that was Allied Contractors. Bid amount $4,976,596.50.
Next bidder is Paneguas Enterprises Incorporated. Total bid price, $2,679,816.05.
5 cents. Okay, that was 2,679,816.05.
Yes.
And we have a bond?
Bid bond is included.
And then one duplicate, one copy.
Got it. So that was, how did you pronounce that?
I said it, Paneguas Enterprise.
Paneguas Enterprises, $2,679,816.05. And apologies if we are not pronouncing that correctly.
Next bidder, and the final bidder for this solicitation, is Manuel Luis Construction Company Incorporated. Total bid price, $3,239,539.20.
Okay, that number was 3,239,539.20.
Yes. Bid bond included.
We have one duplicate and one original.
Thank you. That bid was Lewis Construction Company, Inc., $3,239,539.20.
Yes.
Do we have any other bids?
No, that's the
So
last
that was
one.
our final for Department of Transportation, contract number TR18301, intersection safety improvements. And that concludes our bid opening for today.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. And we will see you on December 7th, which is the next bid opening potential date.